Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia lost can be found. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my impressions on the new battle in Agito Uprising, Cayenne's Wrath. So I'm starting off today with the standard difficulty. This is my very first clear, and I'm going to show off 4 clears today, 2 of standard and 2 of expert. This wasn't too hard of a trial to take down, and I'm pretty excited about what that means for who's usable in it, how accessible it is, how comfortable it feels to clear in public lobbies. But in order to explain all of that, I should start by saying this is my very first clear. This was a blind run. The second clear I'm going to show you is a more farming style run that's been optimized a bit more. I did do all of my standard clears pretty much in solo, so that's going to be what I show off first. And then the same with expert. I will first show off my initial clear, and then I'll show off a slightly more optimized clear. Definitely nothing like some of the speedruns that are out there already for this fight. So Cayenne has 2 main effects. One is this honeycomb shield that he forms around himself. The other thing is that the ring that is around him, that you can see in gold or yellow there, when you're within that ring, he deals increased damage to you, and you deal increased damage to him. The honeycomb shield is definitely the more annoying of the effects. Really, the ring, you have to get out of it for certain high damage moves, potentially, especially if you're a ranged unit, but otherwise, it's almost always better to just stay within the ring and try deal more damage to Cayenne. And either you have a healer, and if you make a mistake, you can get healed, or you don't, and you should hopefully clear before you make any mistake that costs you the run. For standard, I actually found standard to be harder than expert because this move that he does where he slams the mace down and sends out 2 purple and 1 red shockwaves. This kind of reminds me of something that Alphonse might pull off, or like Veronica might have pulled off in their trials back during the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes crossover. Pretty fast and wide-hitting attack. But other than that, there's not too much to really be afraid of. The thing is, that shield that he uses counts as a buff. It's displayed with a buff icon when it's active. So you really want somebody in your team comp, whether in standard, but especially in expert, you really want somebody who can dispel buffs, and the only 2 units who can do that right now within the shadow element are Nefaria and the original Cleo. So these just came out, their mana spirals just came out yesterday, the day before this basically, and of course they ended up being super instrumental in this fight. I kind of wish that they had given the dispel ability to more shadow characters when mana spirals were introduced last month, but as things stand, right now those are great units to bring to this fight because if you leave that buff on Cayenne, it is extremely hard to damage him. You can technically eventually break through the shield, but the buff remains and eventually the shield will reappear around him. So you really want to completely dispel the buff in order to handle it properly. And in the expert version, there are other buffs he gets, meaning you have to be pretty proactive about dispelling or preventing him from getting extra buffs to make sure that the one that you're dispelling is that shield. So when I say this was a more optimal standard clear, you can see there's some chaos ensuing, but it's actually because this was a team I was able to use to auto-battle the standard difficulty. What I found when it came to farming standard, if you do want to do this solo, perhaps because you've just saved up a lot of stamina potions, honey, that's why I'm doing it. I know that if you're refreshing with Warmite, it's probably better to do this using wings than with stamina. But if you want to do auto, what I found to be effective was to use a lead like Patia, who is very, very tanky and buffs the team's defense, so that even if she had to single tank the marker that Cayenne throws out, where it says every man for themselves, but you actually should come together, well, she's strong enough to single tank it. And I also found that having blindness res on my ranged characters was beneficial because they pretty much always stand in the orbit of those yellow spheres that circle around the radius where Cayenne has a buff to himself and a buff to you. So that's what I ended up using for solo clear, and for farming, basically just auto-battled with that, no input, which was pretty nice, and tended to get deathless or no revive because of Patia being there and keeping everybody nice and buffed up. Now we're switching to Expert, and this was my very first run of Expert. It ended up being a clear run. I was running with folks who already knew the fight. Basically woke up the morning after this came out, and everybody was talking about, this fight isn't that bad. It's actually pretty easy compared to Volk. So I wanted to give it a try, and I had built a healer with a Max Unbound Tier 2 High Dragon weapon. I was hoping to use Heinwald, but I decided to try out Cleo since I knew that she could dispel and she had just gotten her mana spiral. I have no idea what the mechanics are here, so I didn't realize we're supposed to try put those on top of each other. I get beat up a little bit, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Cleo has plenty of healing, and we are not already, we haven't already transformed Cayenne here, so we're good. We have time to heal up. I didn't necessarily know he was going to do that twice, but if you're running with 4 DPS or you have very high DPS output, you don't even necessarily see that first marker where you all have to group together because you can get him to transform so quickly. There, you can see that he had a shield out. I didn't really react in time. I think Nefaria took down the shield there, and he's doing swiping moves. So this interested me because this means, to some extent, he's very similar to Volk. He also has a dash attack, just like Volk's, but from what I can tell, it doesn't always seem to target the farthest, so that might be one way that it differs. Either that, or maybe I'm not playing far enough compared to my teammates, but I had trouble having that target me. The prison there, where he grabbed me, does target the farthest, so if you're a healer, you usually want to stay back, or if you're a buff bot, you usually want to stay back so that your teammates have enough DPS to explode you out. And these spheres that get summoned, I didn't know it at the time, but these spheres provide buffs onto the boss. So you want to try lure him away from the spheres and put DPS onto the spheres if you can to prevent them from merging into his body and giving him buffs. When he has a lot of buffs, usually you will dispel the other ones before you dispel the shield that he has, and that's something that you have to be really careful about, because when he has that shield up, it becomes impossible to even generate SP in some cases. Here, I didn't know what to do. I originally thought this was kind of like a chaser attack that would follow you, but I should have realized from standard that it's actually screen wide. The deal with that attack is that you want to stand outside of the yellow area so that you take less damage, or you could transform into a dragon. And similarly here, I didn't really think to get out in time, so I ended up transforming. Luckily, I didn't die there, but I am blinded, and I was getting hit by all sorts of stuff. I thought it was hilarious that Cayenne just chucked one of us, just yeeted them across the screen. Luckily, it wasn't me that time, but honestly, it probably should have been so the rest of the team could keep up the DPS. But we're able to transform and get the HP low on the boss. I should have probably waited, though, so that I could use my Force Strike here to get the boss out of a shield, but luckily we're able to dispel it. This Supreme Sphere's second phase starts with a lot of spheres. This one is very dangerous. He's going to dash around several times, and if you're lacking in DPS to have not cleared by this point, you're going to need probably a lot of dispel or some very careful dashing to make sure that he doesn't get extra buffs, because it's really hard to keep these buffs off of him, and if he gets multiple up after this, you're kind of a sitting duck. Luckily, we have just enough DPS to kind of make it through this phase without too much trouble, but the fact that he walked into 2 of those there was very, very troubling. Thankfully, Nefaria had her Force Strikes available, so she was able to get rid of some of the buffs, and I'm able to charge SP so that I can get my S1 and then get rid of that other shield. And there you pretty much have it. This was the end of the fight, and it wasn't particularly fast, but just like with how they changed Volk to last 10 minutes, this can now last up to 10 minutes as well. I do think that you want to try clear before that first sphere phase to do so comfortably. Once you get into that, it gets a little bit hectic. It's kind of like the Blood Moons or the Snapping Squalls. And there are components to Cayenne's Wrath, just like with Volk's Wrath, that you can actually skip. So that's kind of interesting. If your DPS is high enough, you can skip certain segments. Overall, I had a really positive experience playing this trial. Kind of crazy to clear on the first try, and I'm sure a lot of other players had that experience if they had been preparing for this for a while, building up their units, and were already invested in the end game. So some might say that it's a little bit on the easy side, but honestly, I'm just pretty happy that there's endgame light content with such a variety of units that you can use. You do want somebody who can dispel, but I've seen Delphi used, Ieyasu, Kurin, Heinwald, Summer Verica. There's a lot of units that are perfectly useful for this. Lathna, probably Cassandra, Galacleo. So I really appreciate that, and I'm just happy that this fight is out now. It gives me something else to do. I'm on my way to grinding up a weapon for Nefaria. I really want to make her 6-star weapon since I decided to go ahead and fill out her mana spiral. So that's what I'm looking forward to with the game over the next couple of days and weeks. It's a slow grind, but at least faster than the High Dragon grind. And this is a slightly more improved run a little bit later on. You're going to see a faster clear time, and I'm the only one casting Dispel here, so at this point I have a little bit better awareness of when I should have a Dispel available. Still not perfect by any means, but I had also switched my build to try something fun. I was using Fatalis with the Suit of Midnight, I believe it's called. The Monster Hunter Wyrmprint that gives you Dragon Prep and gives you Affliction Res. So I was trying that out, thinking that maybe I would get a couple of transforms into Fatalis for free with that Affliction Res, and just in case I got blinded, it would protect me then. Fatalis does have a good amount of stats, and having that much strength makes your heals pretty big, so it does make it pretty comfortable to clear, but I know that this is certainly not the best strategy if you want to go super fast, but for us this ended up being pretty consistent. So even though we were able to get hit a couple times, we were able to recover, and yeah, the runs were pretty smooth from here on out. I do think it was kind of easier because the second half of the fight, so many of the patterns are similar to what Volk did when he transformed, and we already kind of got a flavor of that. And I'm glad that each Agito boss has their own unique mechanics. And it did turn out that the personalities do seem to be foils to the main cast. So just like how Volk had issues with Ronzel, this time around with Cayenne, we get explicit conflict and dialogue with Luca. So I think that that was a pretty cool touch. I'm glad that there's different mechanics. I'm glad it's not Plague again. Not that I disliked Plague, I thought it was a sweet mechanic as well, but I think Plague, the rings, feels a little too similar to High Jupiter, and this makes the light content in Endgame feel different. Each of the different trials feel different. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed the new Agito boss fight, checked it out. It's pretty easy to do the standard, even if you have Chimera Tech weapons, so definitely give it a look. It's a really fun trial. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Let me know how your experience was in the comments below. But that is going to do it for this video, everyone. So thank you as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.